I want to show you this technique, how to use open strings in your chord voicings. I don't mean open string chords like this. There's nothing wrong with those chords, but I'm talking about using open strings to add extensions to your 4-part chords. So you can do that, and let's do that. Let's get started, shall we? You need to know your 4-part chords. So we're going to take a look at drop voicings first. So drop 2. So you need to know what drop 2 voicings are. So if I play a C major 7, let's start with major 7 chords. Drop 2 on the middle set of strings. What I mean by that is the 5th to the 2nd string. That's the root position, 1st inversion, 2nd inversion, and 3rd inversion. So if you want to add extensions, the first extension is the 9th. So we have a 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. What you usually do when you play 9 chords is that you swap the 9, you swap it out with another note. You replace one of the other notes of the chord with the 9th. Because it's difficult to play 5 notes. It's still 4-part harmony, but with open strings you can actually do that. So the E string is the 9th of what? It's the 9th of D. That means I can play D major 7 and add the open E string as an extension. Now this chord would not be possible to play, I don't think. It would be extremely difficult to play this chord without using an open string. So you can only do it with D, right? So which is nice because it gives D its own kind of character. That means I can play the inversions. This is also D major 9. This is a nice one. Remember also that you could superimpose this chord with other chords, like it could be a B minor 11. It could be an E sus. So sometimes it works better, and some of the shapes won't work that good. So this would be an E sus 11, or whatever you want to call it. Should also consider the difference if I play it like this, or maybe with my fingers, as opposed to if I arpeggiate it. The way I see it is you could arpeggiate it 2 different ways. You could arpeggiate it in the order of the strings so that you come up with interesting sequences, or you could play them in the order of the notes. There I'm arpeggiating the notes in order, if you know what I mean. Or the way I would normally play an arpeggiated chord if it was like an open chord, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next chord extension. What if the E is the sharp 11? That's the next extension we find on major 7 chords. Well, the E is the sharp 11 of B flat. Already here. Great chord. So I'm just playing a regular garden variety B flat. And adding the sharp 11. Now this chord is possible to play if I move it, if I do one of those weird but not very user friendly. I don't bars across the frets. And I know Ben Monder does that. But anyway, so here's B flat inversions. Now here you get the minor second on top. It's not advisable, but if I arpeggiate it, it can sound nice. Again, I can play the notes in the order of the strings or the order of the notes. You have to kind of think when you do that. This is a weird one. What I like to do when you have a minor second inside the chord, I like to do that, like maybe play. So this could also be other, could be other chords, could be G minor 13. A little bit difficult to grab. And then lastly, there could be a 13. The open E string could be a 13. It would be the 13 of G. So I could play this one. I could actually grab the G on the bottom with the, if I rearrange my fingers. So this is a very big chord. Involves all the 6 strings. Not something I would use really, so we're gonna talk about that later on, like why are we doing this and when are you using this? But it could be for like composing. It makes me think of like Ralph Towner and even Leo Brouwer. They would use chords like this where which involves all the strings, or even Villa-Lobos. They have these etudes and preludes where they use the whole guitar. But for comping in jazz, you don't really throw in this chord, right? If you're playing a swing tune. But you should still study this because you develop an awareness of the extensions and some stuff like that. So let's do the same thing, but using the B string. So now we need to move our shape to the bottom set of strings, so the 4 lowest set of strings. So B is the 9th of A major. So A major 7. Same drop voicing, I just play it on the bottom strings. That was a little bit tricky to grab. There are rules for where certain chord extensions and how low you can go because of the nature of the overtone series and the instrument. So if you go too low, if you put the 7th in the bottom too low, it might not work. But this could be a sound, but I wouldn't play this for an A major 7 if I'm just playing with somebody, you know what I mean? Maybe I want to write a tune with this chord. It's the sharp 11 of F. This is not that weird. This is kind of straightforward. This is a beautiful sound. But again, be careful when you have the minor second on top. By the way, this is one of my favorite sounds, the second inversion of major 7 on the bottom set of strings. Love that sound. Of course I can throw in the E string as well. I could do that with the A2, because the E string is the 5th. And the B is the 11th of D major. Sound. My favorite chord again. So you might want to write an etude by mixing these chords around. So A, F, D, A, F, D. It's also a good technique exercise, as you can tell. You could use the G string as an extension as well, but then you would have to use other drop. I could use is it drop 3, 2, and 4? Drop 2 and 3? I can't remember. But if I play an F major 7 like that, for example, I could play the D flat, sharp 11. But I'm not gonna go through all those because it's too much. I want to inspire you to explore this more depending on your own knowledge of chord voicings and stuff like that. But of course there are many more chords than major 7. We just did major 7 chords in drop 2 there. Let's just say that you want to do minor 7s. Then minor 7 would be this. If I want to use the 11th, it's 11th. Or the 13, which is really nice, G minor. I really like this sound. This is a G minor 7 in first inversion, but it's also a B flat 6. Those chords share the same notes. If I add the sharp 11, if I think of it as a B flat, I get this chord. They use this in flamenco. So flamenco is a style where they really get the most out of the guitar, so they use these voicings. Right, so that they really get the most out of the guitar. That's why it's important to study flamenco. But I mean, it's not that strange. This could be some kind of B flat chord. It could be something you play on Bright Size Life. So now you have more chords to mix and match. You want to write an etude, maybe play D major 7 to D minor 7. minor 7, B flat. I'm just mixing. That could be a tune. You could use this for composing, for coming up with different ways of playing chords that you haven't played, and write maybe little etudes for yourself. There is also this idea of using the open strings to create chords otherwise not possible to play. So if I want to play closed chord voicings, so these are drop voicings, right? So you should do this with all the kind of chord types. So major 7, we did that, minor 7. Do major 6 and minor 6 are redundant because there are other chords, but you do it minor 7 flat 5, dominant chords, any kind of chord that you use, and do what we just did. And write down the ones you like so that you remember them, and see if you can throw them in tunes, so apply them to tunes. But let's talk about closed voicing. So if I want to play, let's say, a C major 7, that's the closed C major 7 in root position. That one is easy to play, but as soon as I get into the inversions, it gets pretty tricky. So the first inversion would be. So we don't use these. Okay, what is the top note? It's the root of C major 7. So if I use the open string, well then it's an E major 7. So I can't play this otherwise really stretchy chord with the open string, or B major 7. Second inversion, C major 7, closed, second inversion. Well, we already have the open string. A little bit stretchy. So what you want to do is you want to swap out the middle strings. Instead of playing C, B, you play open B, C. So that's the C major. A minor, common in bossa nova. Major, minor. So this one is actually movable. A bit stretchy, but doable. And then last is the third inversion closed. So that's the fifth. So that's the fifth of A. It's still a little bit difficult. Yeah, I can't do it. But what you can do is actually drop that third to the ninth. And this you could also do with all the different chord types, minor 7, dominant 7, and all the rest of it. Somebody who is really good at this and have found a way to put it to use is Sid Jacobs. And if you have studied this book, I have a video on this book, the Bill Evans guitar book. There's a lot of this stuff. He's really explored the possibilities of this. So just a little bit of a warning when you play this kind of... As I said, it sounds like Leo Brouwer. If you use the same strings over and over, it can get a little bit... I don't know, it can get a little bit the same. So you should also be aware of that it could be a little bit make the audience fall asleep. I think that Joe Pass talked about this. He didn't like the open strings sound because that's we as guitar players we play in E flat and these kind of chords, right? Play any open strings in that, and he liked that because it doesn't give you the kind of drone Led Zeppelin, this kind of thing. It can get a little bit tiring for the audience, so just to be aware of that it needs to be kind of a balance. But don't quote me on that Joe Pass said that, but I've heard that he talked about that. He liked the kind of keys, but that we play in jazz, but the reason we play those keys are of course of the horn players. If I played E flat, the tenor sax is playing in F, the trumpet is playing in F, and the alto sax is playing in C. So that's why we end up playing in these flat keys. So that actually the guitar is kind of not built for those keys. But instead of incorporating the open strings, we're not playing open strings, which gives it kind of a jazz quality for the guitar player, if you know what I mean. We do have open strings in those keys too. We have the G and the D string in the flat keys, but we don't have those strings. But it's a little bit more difficult to involve these two open strings, but you can do that too. But as I said before, you have to be careful when you put the extensions on the bottom, because if it gets too low, it just get it doesn't sound good. Okay, so one more technique, same idea. We take these C major 7. But instead of using the open string as an extension, we're gonna use the open string as a chord tone. So in this C major 7, the E string is the third of that chord. So it's a little bit redundant, right? But I mean, sometimes you can use that as to create a big sound. But what you can do then is that, well, we swap it out. So instead of playing E, in the voicing I play D, for example. And then the open string. So that's a C major 9. So normally we would play C major 9 like this. There I have replaced the D with the 5th. There's no 5th in this chord. There are other ways, of course, to play, but that's the most common. So do the inversions like that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This is a little bit stretchy. So I'm replacing the E with a D. E is of course the root of E major 7. So I could play 9th instead. Instead of I swap out the E with the F sharp. second inversion, and then F sharp. Now get this. Well, if I add the E on top, I get a big chord. Here's a little thing that somebody showed me. The Swedish guitar player Emil Ernebro showed me this. So it's an E add 9, so E major 7 9 to a C diminished over E and E on top. I don't even know what to call this chord. So as I said, why do we do this? It's not like I'm gonna play these chords when I'm comping in a jazz comp. I usually play very small. When I'm comping in a jazz trio or whatever, even less if I'm comping and there's another comping instrument. If you play a ballad, you can do this. You can play some big old chord. That's an F add 9 with an open E string. But if I practice this way, I discover that there is this chord I can throw in that open string, and it sounds cool. So that it sounds, you get tired of the same chords all the time. So for example, something I like to do is if I play this chord, which we play a lot in jazz, like A flat over B flat, B flat sus or B flat 9. I like to play the open G string there instead of the C, so that's what it sounds like, and this with open string. They're very similar, but this is a little bit spicier, because you get it. If it started to like that, I would use the open string. And if I play C minor, I do this sometimes, which shouldn't work, but it works. So I put the D, open D string, and open G. This is a movable shape, by the way. Very Alan Holsworth sounding. But even more so with the open strings. So I play this sometimes. An E flat major 7 or my major 9, I sometimes play this. So it's an open D, which is the 7th below the root, which is it kind of doesn't work, but it's pushing the limits. So here I'm using the inner two strings to create extensions, and that's a little bit, you have to be a little bit more careful when you do that. And also having a good sound helps. I remember I saw Lagerlund, the Norwegian guitar player, play in Toronto, and he was playing all these kind of chords down here. But he has such a good sound that it worked. But if you have not a good sound, it's just gonna disappear in the mix. So those were some ideas for open strings in your chord voicings. Let me know if you have other ideas on, if you have a favorite chord and open string that you use, or if this was useful in any way. And otherwise, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.